started to talk a little bit about mutual accountability, and we're gonna go deeper in this discussion this week. And it was really cool because I went to transparency working group this week, and there's so much that Zaptimus and Ivy started to do around mutual accountability. So we pulled some questions from there to discuss here, and I think it's all integrated, how transparency works, how we hold ourselves accountable, how we apply the graduated sanctions. So there's all this multiple layers meeting now as we move along, especially with understanding what are the boundaries, understanding what are the rules, and having somehow a culture already. We've been in the cultural build for like 4 or 5 months. So it's been some time for things to emerge, not only the processes that we implemented, but also our behaviors to and our relationships to emerge, and us to be able to observe the patterns from it. So the question I want us to start with today is, how would you like to be held accountable? I think this is often like a very difficult topic for anarchists and from people of the decentralized world. But how can we create a healthier relationship with self-accountability and with mutual accountability? We started to do an exercise in the comments deck to understand our roles. And one of the points of this exercise was, what are the points of success of what you're proposing yourself to do, and how do you measure your self-accountability, and then how would you like others to help you be accountable? So I hope this made sense. Hey Griff, the question that we're starting with is, how would you like to be held accountable? And I'll pass to Zaptimus.
Thanks, Levi. For me, I think being accountable is like an intrinsic motivation. For example, I was talking with them, I don't know if what today or yesterday, and for example, when we are doing the audit in transparency, like our job is like to let others to self-evaluate themselves and share the important documentation on the forum, but it's themselves who do that. And at the same time, if for example someone is saying I'm doing everything, so like to have the high score, then like the community itself would know like they are cheating somehow. So I think it mostly is intrinsic motivation, and since we are a community, we monitor each other. And I'll pass it to Juan.
Sorry, can I get back to you? Can I get back to you, Zap? On if you don't have one on top of your mind, you don't have to say it. But do you have any particular way that you would like to be held accountable? Like, let's say you have something you want to do, and you took that responsibility to do something. But then there is that like delivery. There is a gap between saying that you want to do something and then delivering that something. Is there any way in this process that someone can help you to deliver that something, or that you would like to set for yourself, or something that you already do? Or if not, you can pass, no problem.
I don't know if I fully understood the question, but I'm thinking like, for example, I don't know if it's this way, but if we are asking for funds or something, I think we are right now, maybe, I mean, still on discussion, but having something like Celeste, I think that's something that that helps to people to deliver what they say they are going to deliver. So I think that's a very great tool. We're still discussing that, but yeah, I think that's great. And I'll pass it now to Juan.
Okay, I think I would like to be accountable for the things that I say that I would do. So yes, I think that not delivering is not something bad, but at least trying is the important thing of and being proactive. So and another thing is that I think that what how can we measure that accountability is by um, the having all the peers with the same rules, because otherwise the people that maybe fail to deliver something and see other people having different treatment would be considered bad or unfair. So I think it's important to have the same rules for everyone. And I will pass it to Nate.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think I kind of go on the opposite end of the spectrum of what anarchists or decentralized minded folks would be, and that I believe in kind of a strict adherence to your commitments and having consequences as a result of it. But then you don't want the consequences to be so detrimental that it deters you from participating in the community activities. So I think establishing clear expectations around what to expect when you do commit to something, and then having the resources available to say, hey, this is what we're looking for in a clear manner, and this is the dates by which we expect it, and having difficult conversations with people. I think that's really at the core of it, is being able to have a difficult conversation with somebody and saying, hey, this is what we expect, this is what we want you to accomplish, and if you don't feel like you fit into this role or this position, let's find out where your strengths are and put you in that place. And so it's got to be a collaborative movement, but you can't avoid consequences. I think that has to be established. So with that being said, I will pass it to Metaverde.
It depends a lot on what you mean by consequences. I don't know how other people are, but if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And people are certainly welcome to ask me how it's going and offer to help. But if somebody comes at me like they're holding me accountable or they're coming at me with consequences, I'm not going to do that. I'm definitely, if I pick it up, I'm going to do it. That's all there is. And I just really feel like we need to have that trust with each other. And if somebody isn't doing something that needs to be done and has a timeline, I mean, I don't see this as a consequence. You would just have to let them know that, by the way, we really need this done and we're going to have to pass it to somebody else to do. But I don't see that as a consequence or holding some. And I think that when we get into, I, if this is oppositional disorder more than anarchy, but when somebody comes at me with accountability and consequences, I'm not, we're all trying, we're all doing what we can, we're all doing our best. I think that's I'm not sure.
Can I ask you a question, Metaverde?
Yeah.
Is there any way that someone could approach you in a way that wouldn't be aggressive or unwelcome to you?
Absolutely, just what I'm doing. Hey, how's that? Like, supposing I'm like going to do some kind of list of links or something. How's that link? Do you have a time frame on? I mean, that's all we should be doing to each other. in my opinion. I mean, so I was raised by a prosecutor, and I got cross-examined and grilled a lot growing up as a teenager, as an adult, even like through adulthood. That's how I was treated by my mother and by my. So it's not. It's. I get that it's a personal thing, but I just don't understand framing things that way in a decentralized, collaborative community. I mean, I, asking people how they're doing if they have a time frame isn't. It's two adults. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass to Durgadas.
Yeah, so this conversation is, I think, the reason why the gravity group is so necessary here, and why I actually spent a lot of time making sure that people understood that there's kind of a duality between trust creation and conflict resolution, in the sense that the what I'm hearing, like let's say from Metaverdi, who was treated in a certain way about communication, that would be a very low trust kind of situation that she kind of grew up in, and so she would always feel, like she's on the stand in many ways, and I don't want people to feel like that. At the same time, I do think that asking a person how it's going, and if there's something we can do, is actually it is a kind of a consequence, in the sense that it's not getting outside of the punishment reward thing. We're all doing this for different motivations, and just understanding that my ability to understand what her motivations are is an actual process of trust creation, which would then avoid a future conflict potentially. So I don't want to speak for her, but I'm just saying what I heard. Um, and we all have different motivations around those things. So as far as being held accountable, what I would basically like to be able to do is to have some ability to enter into a trust creation process with both the overall sort of token engineering commons, but also the individuals who might be holding me accountable, and then to then be able to, as a result of that trust creation, to be able to expect a reasonable approach to whatever sort of conflict resolution could come out of it. And I think it's the paradox and the dynamic between trust creation and conflict resolution in which we are holding ourselves accountable. And so I think that's my viewpoint on it.
Not to jump back in, but isn't asking other how, and if if there's something we can do to help, shouldn't that be happening anyway? I mean, that shouldn't even be seen as a consequence. That should be in any kind.
Yeah, I'm just saying a consequence of participating in a community is you might have people,
Oh, okay.
and so for some people that might be, are you nagging me? Are you know what I'm saying? Like, so depending on your perspective on things, you might have a different view. So,
Okay.
it's just consequences are based in context to some degree.
Yeah, I think it's the wording. I won't feel like I'm being nagged if people ask how I'm doing, and that won't make me feel like
Yeah, and
somebody said, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. I'm like, wait a minute.
yeah, and that's why it's so important to have this shared language, and why the gravity group exists, is to create that sort of trust, and the paradox of trust and conflict is the accountability process defined, it seems to me. So
I love the
I
gravity.
really appreciate the buffer of that, um, so that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I appreciate.
Thank you. Can I pass to Shui Garcia?
Hi, everyone. Well, I agree with Septimus. I think that Celeste is gonna help a lot in this matter, and I mean, in a way, I also get what Metaverde is saying about, like, cultural background and all of that. Well, I grew up in Mexico, and I also, for the past 10 years, I freelanced in, like, film and music. So accountability and like cultural issues are something like very relevant in developing countries. So I kind of like understand how it could be associated with a negative context, like people being held accountable, but this is more like towards like the end of not uh not uh sorry, I lost the word, not delivering, that's what I mean. So like for me now that I'm getting more involved in these communities where accountability is like a very relevant issue. Um, it just comes to my mind. I don't know. Like probably you guys are gonna be much better informed than me, but uh, I don't know if the term conviction accountability exists. Just like in a way that works in like conviction voting. Uh, so that one project, and I mean if someone is working on something, this is attached to like uh you know sorry, my English is not is not that great today, but a budget, I mean, so every project is like attached to a budget, and these budgets have like their own deadlines. So uh in a way, even though the people responsible for this project have the funds are uh, not gonna be like available all at once. But this is just like an idea that I get from what I've been reading and learning these past few weeks. So, well, yeah, those would be my two cents in the matter.
Here, I'll steal it from Chewy. As far as accountability, honestly, I really am into the Zen Hub board that's happening. And just being like socially accountable is pretty nice for me personally. I feel more of an obligation to not let people down than like, oh, like an escrow service. It's like, to me, that's more of a way of being like, oh well, it's not worth the money anymore or something. To me, like I don't feel as accountable to things that would be like monetary related as much as I am the social accountability. So like having a plan in advance and saying these things are going to get done, and then it's also really nice to have someone who's like who you're accountable to. So it's like, yes, I have to publicly state I'm going to do these things in front of a group of people that I feel accountable to. But then also it's also really nice, like Menaverde said, in a way, to just have someone come around and check in on a regular basis to see how you're doing, and not in a way that's like nagging or something. Just like just a check in. Hey, I'm your accountability buddy, and I just want to see how you're doing. Maybe it's a regular meeting 3 days before the deadlines or something, or whatever. And I'll pass it to Santi.
Thank you, Griff. It just comes to my mind. Many years ago, I was working for Hewlett Packard, and there was this sentence that said, "We are managing by wandering around." And I kind of take that sentence because this is what many of us do right now. We're working on a decentralized manner. We are far away from each other. We just link digitally. And the way we relate and the way I feel accountable is just by conviction, because I believe on what I'm doing and I don't give a shit if we make money or not. The day that I have to work for money, I just don't feel accountable at all. I've been working for companies and I quit because I wasn't feeling accountable at all. I wasn't doing it from the heart. I was doing it for the pay. And that's when I feel accountable and I don't need anything else. And of course, I love helping the rest of the team, and I love the rest of the team helping me when I struggle with something I'm dealing with. But but I just don't need anything else. If I feel it and I join it, and I just get the compromise of doing what I'm supposed to do, and that's it. And I'll pass it back to you, Libby.
Santi, that's so beautiful. You basically said that you're accountable to your heart. Thanks, everyone, for all those answers. I think from like looking into this a little bit later, there's already some exercises that exist in your answers, and I think we could have some type of accountability rituals and have a different one for every person, and promote this as a healthy practice as well, that we don't have to have like one accountability measure that will work for everybody, but how can we develop spaces for these relationships to find what works for each one, and like having accountability buddies like Grief said. I think it's a really cool idea. Can everyone hear me right? I'm seeing everything kind of pixelated. Yep. Okay, cool.
Yep.
I wanted to share this phrase from Ostrom from the chapter we're reading today in the book club, that she talks about when the rules in use conform to the design principles discussed in chapter 3, that are enabling individuals to design rules that will keep monitoring costs low. So when individuals can design their own rules and they adopt contingent strategies, individuals are also motivated to monitor each other to obtain the information they need to pursue this contingent strategy. So when we design collectively our own rules, and we pick a strategy from the rules that we designed, we are incentivized to monitor each other to keep this strategy going, because we chose in a collective way. So if individuals begin monitoring others and learn that others comply most of the time with a set of rules, they are more likely to be willing to adopt and or continue contingent strategies. Sorry, it's really hard to focus. I don't know if you can hear. Like my whole house is shaking right now. But I hope it made wow. But I hope it made sense what I said. That
Are you having an earthquake?
They're destroying your sentence here. They are destroying it.
They're destroying me. Oh my god. Okay, today is the worst. Like, it's not usually like that. But
we hear you pretty well. The construction in the background isn't so bad. Your mic is doing a good job.
Okay, great. So what I was trying to say is that we are more likely to find ways that work for us to monitor each other, because we are all like creating these rules and picking the strategies. So it's so special that we are in this process, that we are creating the rules that work for us. So just see if anyone has a comment about this. I'll pick one. Right? You might have a comment about this. If not, we can continue, or others can jump in.
No, yes, actually, by reading the book, I find that it's very related to what we're doing right now. And I agree that where individuals follow rules and engage in mutual monitoring, that institutional arrangements are reinforced, and that each individual then encourage the another one to maintain enduring patterns for this consistent rule following behavior. I think that is a very clear message in the book, and it's very related to a quote that I heard here a lot of times from Durgadas, and is what a culture teaches, then it becomes. So we have to teach, and we have to make this a cultural thing so that it can become what we want. We need to make all individuals follow rules and be accountable in the same way, so that this builds legitimacy of our agreements for everyone.
I wanted to add something to that because I agree completely with what Juan just said, and it follows along with what Ostrom teaches. But one thing that I noticed within Ostrom and the examples that she gives with these commons is that, the evolution of institutional arrangements, they didn't start off, at everybody following the rules and everybody, naturally agreeing with each other. That, at the beginning, they had to be very strict in terms of setting out the expectations for people and understanding what is to be expected from a community, creating the norms that turn into sustainable institutions later on. And I think that the familiarity of each working group, for example, I think is really important in terms of, getting to understand each other and knowing, how people operate and setting expectations from, individual relationships to the actual processes involved in each working group and how we administer Softgov throughout, the lifetime of the TEC. I think those are the foundation for, building institutional arrangements. And I think that we have to be really kind of, strict in terms of this is the behavior we expect. And if somebody deviates from that, we say, hey, we have to stay on track, because in order to create these institutional systems, we have to really be strict at the beginning.
I've written some stuff in the Softgov thing, if you don't mind me jumping in here. I was just saying, I mentioned previously about how one of the ways that it helps to think about rules is think about rules as guidelines if you have some kind of problem with the external enforcement of things. But then the moment you really start having a problem following these guidelines, or you think you're the exception to them, it's perhaps better that you think of them as rules. And so it is a very interesting paradox to sort of deal with your own individuality within a group. And it's pretty much always going to be like that in a democratic system. And anybody who wants to read more about that or learn more about that, I recommend Astra Taylor's work on democracy. In particular, her CBC interview is very good. I'll post a link to it in the Softgov channel.
Awesome. Thank you. So we can follow to the next topic that was coming from the Transparency Working Group and the amazing points that Zeptimus and Ivy raised. So what would be a way to see if roadmaps are realistic? Like, is the roadmap from each working group realistic? We have a sprint process now that we go through every plan of all the working groups together. So we have some type of a holistic planning that everyone can opinionate in between. And I think this is already an accountability measure. But I was wondering if we will continue with this post-hatch, or when we don't have, if we don't have such strict planning sessions, how are we gonna keep each other accountable? Do we feel like there is space for example, oh, I come to the Softgov working group and I don't think they are following the things that I read in the manifesto or in the roadmap. How do we communicate this? Do we feel like there is space? Is there any other process needed? And I'll pass to Zap if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I was talking with something like that with Sam, and yeah, there is a point for example, as a transparency working group, we don't know everything that's happening inside the working group. And related what Metaverde was saying before, like we do it because we have intrinsic motivation on doing so. So our job should be help people to share that roadmap and let them say if that's realistic or not. Because, for example, if Sam gives me a roadmap and it's full of tech stuff, I have no idea if that's realistic or not. And yeah, I really love to help people accountable for that, and because of the intrinsic motivation.
I'll jump in and say I really think that it's a culture, it's a Softgov cultural thing. You know, if we create an environment and a culture of accountability and praising people who keep people accountable, you know, and this sort of you know, these check-ins and you know, calling people out isn't really the right idea, but but helping people be alerted if someone's going off course, or if not someone, but a team especially, you know, or a role. In some of the groups that I've worked in before, we had a roles process, and we had like roles, not souls, where like the accountability is on like the role, the piece that and it's not about the person, it's about just saying, oh my God, this thing is not happening, and yet we want it to happen. I see this as a problem. This is a problem. I don't know what to do about it, but at least I'm stating the problem. And if that can be encouraged culturally, then that could kind of help it. But it's a gentle process, you know, like it's really easy to get defensive if it's your role, for instance, and feel like challenged and be like, I can only do so much, you know. So I don't know. It's a difficult thing, but I do think the solution is cultural, and just leaving the space and giving the praise to the people who are bringing that accountability.
Can I jump in here? There's nothing more important in the oil industry than accountability, mainly because of health reasons. You know, people can die. I can do something wrong and kill somebody. I mean, it's really, you know, and they're gone. That's it. And then what? Somebody shows up and they're going to ask questions. Why did that happen? What are you going to say? Well, I had a bad day. Oh, I guess I did this. You don't get to do that. And I think the biggest, because the cultural thing is why it works, because there's so many different ways to get somebody responsible for their actions. Some guys you got to yell at. Some guys you gotta take a softer approach. You gotta kind of like, hey man, like you've been at that all day. You gonna get it done today, maybe, or what? You know, everybody's different, and you have to learn how to do that as you grow in your positions, because the cultural aspect is it. For instance, like in DeFi, the drilling rig is all that matters. It's a way of life, like what Santi was referring to. The reason we do it, do what we do, isn't just because they give us a bunch of money. It's the lifestyle. It's the fact that we have time off. It's the days off. It's the fact that I only worked half the year. It's the fact that I had a job that wasn't a normal 9 to 5. It was everything about it. And the rig was the only way that was going to give us that way of life. We ourselves as people didn't really exist. We certainly didn't exist to the companies that employed us, the big ones, but we existed to each other. And therefore, we had to hold each other accountable if we wanted to continue that lifestyle that we really loved. And if you want to excel at that and really create something, then it's all of our responsibility to make sure it continues. You know, this rig can go to the weeds any day of the week if nobody wants to show up and do what they're supposed to do. And then it's gone, boys. And then what? Then where are you going to go? You're going to go somewhere else? And what are they going to ask where you came from? You came from a rig that's in the weeds. Why is it in the weeds? Because you won't do your job. So, you know, it is a huge cultural thing, and it relies, and, you know, oil is very centralized. So there's a huge chain of command. So the people at the top are greatly responsible for making sure the people that aren't under you, they're people you should be trying to get to you or above you. The best drillers aren't guys that ran through hands because they only could do things one way. And yeah, they were good at drilling wells, but they went through 30 guys in a year that could have been just awesome people. No, the best drillers are the guys that can tell you that they've put 25 directional drillers and another 30 company men in their seats over the last 15 years. Those guys are all stars because they made people better than they were, you know, and they did it because they held them accountable to that higher level of a cultural understanding that's just unspoken in the industry. There's only really one way of doing things, but it's doing things together because we all have to be accountable for each other. Okay, thank you.
That was beautiful. Were you asking about sprints? Because I kind of had an idea about the sprints, because sprints are like really huge, you know, when we get it on the board and everything. And I was wondering if doing like smaller working groups within the sprints, it could maybe have like a 15-minute stand-up like halfway through the week or something, so they could check in with each other maybe like every 4 or 5 days between the 2-week sprint plannings, if that wouldn't help so people didn't feel so in the weeds like sometimes.
Yeah, I think that there's ideas of starting to get fractal once the group starts to grow, if that happens, and then that would be something to consider for sure. And all of the ideas are like super welcome at this point because we're experimenting with what works for us, what doesn't, what, like it's a trial and error situation, and it's really it's a privilege that we have the space to do that somehow. Not so flexible, but still with some space to try things. And I think from my observation, since we started, and accountability has been something I've been thinking a lot about from other communities as well. I think trust, building trust is something huge on the self accountability. So ideally, we wouldn't even have to use so much the mutual accountability methods because we would be self accountable. But considering we are humans and we're never going to be perfect, and we might be like handling too many things, or we might be going through something, and I mean, infinite reasons why we might not be self accountable at the moment, then we have these mutual accountability practices in place to help sustain this movement. And it's really important for both of them to have trust. So if I trust somebody that I'm working with, I am more willing to see what they're telling me as something helpful and not aggressive. And if I trust the group, I also want to be accountable because there is this social element that Griff was talking about. So when we start to build shared norms, patterns of reciprocity, and when we have a social capital, this really takes shape. And I think we're approaching this point now where we have many of those. So it's a really interesting moment to experiment with these practices. And then just to hook on something that Griff was talking about, one of the mechanisms being praise. So another thing we were talking on transparency is how are all contributors being acknowledged and how do we balance impact hours? Because, for example, usually none of the people that are quantifying praise are developers, for example. And then how do we know that we're like making a fair quantification to all the developers? So, and this is just one example, but we were thinking, what if we had like every couple of weeks a board with all the results that people could come together and say like, oh, I think this person should have more, I think this person should have less, I think the impact hours for who already came to a session, we kind of do that in the end collectively. And we were wondering like, is that something interesting to open for more people and to have like a moment to look into this together? Maybe Griff, you have some thoughts on that?
My internet's going out. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I was thinking if it would be interesting for that moment in the praise quantification when everyone that is quantifying look at the final results and is like, oh, is this like balanced? How is this right? If it's interesting to open for a larger group of people. So maybe people that were undermined or people that received too much, like that there is more inputs on just that final part.
I guess specifically for the praise quantification, it's set in a way where the people who quantify are not judging their themselves really, and so that would be the challenge, is opening up to a wider group of people. Then you'd want to, like in this specific instance, you'd want to make sure that those people who are doing those adjustments are not biased or like overly biased for their own, or even that there's not a sense of bias, that they could be adjusting things for their own benefit. Or I think in this community, it'd be even more likely that people would adjust it to their own detriment. And it's just like a challenging situation. So I don't know. Of course, it's always down for the experimentation, but there is this, it is set up so that the people who have that task, that it's open, that anyone can take that task, but then the consequences are clear, that you don't get to decide your own impact hour directly, you know?
Do you think there's a technical solution to that, like some type of like approval voting scheme that people can use on a certain time interval to vote on, you know, the quantification of praise and whether it's accurate, and basically just kind of correlate the public community opinions versus what we have documented?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds cool. So like, instead of having people come in and be part of the tweaking, just more like validating the final results that the quantifiers have. I mean, that's always nice. I mean, I don't know that it would necessarily, I'm not you know, I guess I have like a voter apathy challenge there, but I don't think that it's always nice to, even if, you know, yeah, it's always nice to have things be approved or have things be accountable to the public in some way.
What also could be interesting in that matter, like when we are doing the transparency audit, one of the points is all the contributors of the working group feel acknowledged. and then I mean we're still building the trust, and when one member of one working group or of a consensus or a steward, it doesn't matter who is it, but they say people is getting acknowledged, that's, and if you're asking this question, they are thinking on that. So I think that also make people not accountable, make the price more fair. And you are not saying like, hey, you have a lot of impact hours that you should not deserve, or the other way, you should have more, and I think that can be more controversial.
Yeah, I agree. So you're suggesting that we constantly remind people if everyone is being acknowledged, so that that immediately like opens the awareness, and maybe you see someone doing something and they weren't acknowledged for that, and then you dish the praise. Cool. Cool. That was it for anybody else that's going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that in many ways, it seems to me that if we're a decentralized community, all we really have a right to is the effort itself. The outcome is a byproduct of that, but it's not a thing that if we stop and say, oh, so and so did, or such and such, or I did, or he did, or she did, that doesn't make as much sense to me as it does to try to emphasize the amount of effort and impact that a person has in the moment, and then let that aggregate on its own. Just because in many ways we don't have any right to the end result. It's really because we're decentralized, the praise and the blame all goes together in one kind of big thing. So that's just my final thought on that.
So I don't know how people feel about like I don't know too much about the praise quantification system in its current form. However, my thoughts around it are centered around working groups themselves, because those are the kind of distinguished functions of the TEC in general, and having kind of a budget for working impact hours for each working group. But that is on the assumption that individuals are working within one working group and not multiple working groups, and that each group is a tight-knit community that can account for praise quantification on their own. And that way, praise comes from your peers that you work with on an annual basis, rather than me judging the impact hours of somebody in the dev group, or the transparency group, or the legal group, where I have no justification to give praise or deny praise. But I don't know what the outlook is for the future of the praise quantification. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a good segue to the next topic, that is Sourcecred, because this is one of the discussions that started to happen, like, oh, after Hatch, how are we going to do to acknowledge each working group and to reward? Are they going to ask for X amount of funding to conviction voting and then distribute this among the working group participants? Or are we going to continue to praise and then send a specific amount to ask conviction voting to reward the praise? We had some conversations around this, and they're still kind of in the open. So maybe Santi, you can talk a little bit about how is Sourcecred going. From our last session, we were waiting for a couple of weeks to understand how to ask this further questions, how to integrate repraise. And then Mateo posted, he said he wouldn't be able to come, but he posted in the agenda the updated instance. I think you guys had a second run, so there's all the results there.
Yeah, we had the second round of fake tokens distribution, and we're reaching the point where everything is just about ready to test it. Okay, so the tool is ready and it's measuring. I'm not saying it's measuring perfectly, but it's measuring, and the results coming out are more or less reasonable, and we are seeing what we were expecting to see. Now, once we have the tool ready, it's about the community to decide how much do we want to allocate, and how are we going to allocate it before the hatch and after the hatch. Of course, before the hatch, the only thing we can give away are impact hours, and after the hatch, I guess it will be these tokens. But we can do this in many different ways. One Hive goes like you mentioned. They make a proposal in conviction voting, requested for a certain amount of honey, and I think that they decide in the swarm how they distribute throughout the weeks that honey. Okay, we can have a group inside token engineering, which is the one leading that, or we can, as a group, decide we're going to give away 5 tokens, 6 tokens every week to distribute throughout all the information that we fetched using Sourcecred. Okay, and we can do it for several weeks and have a budget for 5 or 6 weeks, and after that, analyze the results and see if we want to keep moving that way, or we want to change it, give some more, give less, give the amount depending on the funds that are on the vault, or there's a whole world of options out there, and we can decide how we want to move forward. But again, the tool is just about ready. Okay, so we can experiment with it. The only addition that we're going to do is we're going to offer after every distribution, we're going to post somewhere in the forum the charts, so anyone can check after a few weeks and figure out what happened in that specific week and who got what, and and everything's going to be there. Because if we just keep the charts on a dynamic way, we lose some of the information. So we prefer to just have snapshots of every distribution and post them on the forum. But also that can be changed in the future.
Cool. Thanks for the updates. We have 7 minutes left. There's time for maybe one question or comment, if anybody has.
You did a really great job today, guys. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Kiwi. Okay, so maybe we'll end 5 minutes earlier. I'll give a round of. I think we had many ideas for accountability, mutual accountability measures in this doc from the answers of everyone and the notes. So, what if we come up with one mutual accountability measure that we can start practicing next week? So, does I'll pass around and see if somebody wants to pick one. If you want to commit with, like, I'll look into the notes, or I'll think and find an accountability thing that we can practice, and it can be very simple. So I'll pass around, and if you don't want to pick any, or if you don't want to take that commitment, that's totally fine. I'll take one. So I'll bring next week one practice we can do together, and I'll pass to Juan.
I think it's very important to work on a criteria that can be the same for everyone. So I think maybe I can work with SEP around that they are working around the criteria of transparency with Ivy. So I think I can jump into that. Because I think if we have this criteria, we can have like credibleness of this criteria that applies to everyone. And I will pass to Jake.
Sorry. So I always try and I'm just gonna kind of honestly, I'm gonna kind of just continue what I'm doing, because like I said, the cultural thing is the biggest thing, and you have to initially. So I'm still getting used to DeFi too, anyways, because initially you have to make sure people understand that it's okay to ask for help. There's no reason why you can't ask for help, because the worst thing, and I saw this all the time, was that if you create an atmosphere where people are afraid to fail, then they will never ask for help. They'll be too scared to, because they'll think that you think they can't succeed. And you also, at the same time, though, people got to get their own shit done. It can't turn into this just getting other people always doing something for someone else. There's a thin line there, but you have to create an atmosphere where people can ask for help. So it's important to have, for instance, stewards, or other people in different positions that can go out and so we would always walk around the rig, and you got to check on people. Hey, what's going on, man? How's that coming? And it's all in the matter of how you do it. But you got to hold them accountable, and also know if they need help, or if they're doing too much, then get them help. Be like, hey, why don't we send this other guy over there? It's okay, man. We got to get that done. It looks like you need help. That's not his fault. It doesn't mean he can't do it. We just need to get it done. It's a different approach, so to speak. But you got to create it. You got to create that atmosphere that it's okay to ask for help. So, because the most important thing is getting something done. That's all that really matters, I guess. Thank you. I gotta go.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you.
Take care.
I love the idea of doing a call together. I think two brains think better than one, and I think we both together can bring a mutual accountability practice. I think it should be here in the next COP call. And yeah, I really love the thing we were saying before. Like we have to create an environment of culture of accountability. I think that's so important and so great. I'll pass it to Durgadas.
Yeah, I just think for my part, I feel like we really, as a community, need to understand and quantify the people and the processes which are involved in trust creation in an explicit manner. So that then when we come to ask somebody for accountability, then the context of that is feels and acts very differently, and will potentially avoid conflicts from arising in the future. So I would like to kind of understand how it's kind of a three-part thing. There's the creation of trust, there's the accountability in the middle, and then the conflict resolution at the end. And in many ways, a conflict resolution is going to be a failure to do the first two parts, in my view. So So if we take a realistic look at that and focus our efforts on those first two parts, then we're going to end up with a very productive group of individuals and a very productive and community. And if we are educating things in that way, and my final point about this is, it is a little bit odd to me that we have Gravity, Transparency, and Softgov are kind of like three separate working groups. They all seem to me to be a part of sort of one sort of process of trust creation, accountability, and conflict resolution. So it may make sense to reorganize them, rename them, or something according to the practical outcomes of that, or the practical needs. If we're going to ask that we're aligning incentives for all the products that we create and for all the token engineers that we're educating, it seems to me that we should properly align our incentives and our cultural thing around the specific and actionable aspects of this part of the process.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. They were initially one, but then we started to split because there is so much work, but like the work streams are slightly different, even though they are under the same umbrella. And there was a lot of work to be put into this route. But
Oh, yeah.
we can definitely look more into how we're presenting this and the narrative of it. We are a little bit late for the book club, so I just want to thank everyone for coming, and see you guys there if you want to join. We are in the DAO Book Club server.